Alexander has already won impossible battles, but now he faces the decisive test. At Gaugamela, Darius chooses the ground, prepares the plain, and deploys everything he has: scythe chariots, cavalry, elephants. This time, he means to stop Alexander by destroying him completely. If Alexander loses, the dream of Greek revenge ends there. If he wins, he seizes Persia's imperial heart. But defeating Darius is only the beginning, because after Gaugamela, Alexander is no longer just conquering Persia. He is trying to become its new ruler. But what price must he pay to become king of Asia? After leaving Egypt, Alexander turns back toward the northeast. He crosses Syria again and heads for Mesopotamia. The sea is no longer the main strategic problem. Tyre has fallen. Gaza has been subdued. Egypt is in his hands, and the Persian fleet has lost much of its network of bases in the eastern Mediterranean. Now the war shifts inland. The center of the struggle moves toward the great rivers and cities of Achaemenid power: the Euphrates, the Tigris, Babylon, Susa, Persepolis. In 331 BC, Alexander reaches Thapsacus on the Euphrates. There he finds 2 boat bridges already started but not finished. Mazaeus is guarding the river with about 3,000 horsemen. When the Macedonian army approaches, Mazaeus withdraws. Alexander crosses the Euphrates and continues east. Then comes the Tigris. The crossing is harder, the current is strong, and yet even here, Darius still avoids direct battle. Meanwhile, the king tries diplomacy. He offers peace, territory, and dynastic marriage. Alexander refuses. Tradition gives him a memorable line: "There cannot be 2 suns in the sky, nor 2 kings in Asia." Whether authentic or not, it sums up the point. Alexander does not want part of the empire. He wants everything. Shortly before the battle, an unsettling sign appears: a lunar eclipse. Many in the army see it as a dark omen. The diviners, however, turn it into a favorable message. The battle will come within a month, and Alexander will win. Darius does not defend the rivers and still seeks a diplomatic solution. But at the same time, he is choosing the battlefield. Darius has learned from Issus. There, he had fought in a narrow space between sea and mountains, and his numerical advantage had been trapped by the terrain. At Gaugamela, about 55 to 60 miles from Arbela, Darius chooses a broad, open plain. Here, he can use what Persia has in abundance: space, cavalry, chariots, and numbers. The ground is prepared in advance. The plain is leveled to make movement easier for the scythed chariots. War vehicles fitted with side blades, meant to tear openings in the Macedonian line. Darius deploys about 200 of them. He also has about 15 elephants, more impressive than decisive, but useful for projecting Persian military power. Alexander arrives with about 40,000 infantry and 7,000 cavalry. Darius still commands far greater forces, although exact ancient figures are exaggerated. This time, however, numbers alone do not decide the battle. The ground does. The night before the battle, Parmenion proposes a night attack. Alexander refuses. He does not want victory won in darkness. He wants Darius defeated in front of everyone, in daylight. It is a proud answer, but also a political one. If the great king falls in open battle, no one can say he was beaten by deception. According to tradition, before the battle, Alexander also sacrifices to Phobos, god of fear. It is a powerful detail. It does not suggest weakness, but awareness of risk. At stake is not just a battle. It is the right to rule Asia. On October 1, 331 BC, both armies deploy. Darius occupies the center, surrounded by his royal guard and loyal units. Alexander places the phalanx in the center, Parmenion on the left, and the striking wing on the right, with the companion cavalry. The decisive maneuver begins on the Macedonian right. Alexander does not attack the center immediately. He moves gradually to the right with the companions and light troops, as if trying to move off the ground Darius has prepared for the chariots and the Persian mounted wing. Darius cannot allow it. If Alexander leaves the leveled zone, the scythed chariots lose effectiveness and the entire Persian plan could collapse. He orders the cavalry of his left wing to follow and contain him. The farther the Persians stretch outward, the thinner and more fragile their line becomes. Between the wing pursuing Alexander and the center, where Darius stands, a gap opens. The scythed chariots are sent forward, but the Macedonians are ready. They open lanes, let them pass, and strike them from the sides with light infantry and javelins. The weapon meant to sow panic fails to decide the battle. On the left, Parmenion comes under pressure, and Alexander has to halt to restore order to the line. At that moment, he sees what he has been looking for: a gap to strike Darius directly. He does not try to destroy Persia's army. He sends the companions against Darius in shock formation, where the phalanx advances behind them. For the great king of Persia, this is the decisive moment. If he stays, he risks destruction. Darius flees, and when he leaves the field, the battle is decided. After Gaugamela, Persia does not vanish in a day, but it stops functioning as a power capable of stopping Alexander. Darius flees towards Media. Alexander, however, chooses a different path. He does not pursue him immediately. First, he enters the cities that keep Achaemenid power standing. The first is Babylon. The city opens its gates without a major battle. It is a political handover more than a military surrender. Alexander enters as the new sovereign, respects local cults, and understands that governing Asia means controlling symbols, aristocracies, and administration. At Alexander's side is Hephaestion, his closest companion. While many Macedonians view this transformation with suspicion, Hephaestion remains firmly with the king. From Babylon, he heads for Susa, an imperial capital. The city falls without serious resistance, but the real blow is the treasure, about 50,000 talents. With it, he pays the army, funds new campaigns, and sends about 3,000 talents to Antipater in Europe. Before he reaches the symbolic capital, however, there is an obstacle: the Persian Gates, a mountain pass defended by Ariobarzanes, satrap of Persis. Here, Alexander runs into serious trouble for the first time after Gaugamela. The pass is narrow. Defenders strike from above, and the advance stalls. With help from a local guide, he finds a secondary route, and with a night march, outflanks the Persian position. At dawn, he attacks from behind while other troops attack from the front. The clash is hard, but decisive. The Persian line breaks. Sources differ on whether Ariobarzanes is killed or withdrawn. The road to Persepolis is open. Persepolis is not just any city. It is the monumental stage of Achaemenid kingship, the place where Persian power displays itself in its most solemn form. Here, Alexander finds an even greater treasure. According to tradition, up to 120,000 talents, wealth almost unimaginable for a Greek polis. Yet Persepolis also becomes the place of destruction. The royal palace burns. Revenge for Athens? A political gesture? The excesses of a banquet? Perhaps a combination of all three. It remains one of the most controversial episodes of Alexander's life.
Did you know that most people who watch our documentaries aren't subscribed yet? If you enjoy animated maps and history, join our community. Leave a like and subscribe so you never miss the next episodes.
After Persepolis, Alexander returns to the problem he can no longer postpone. Darius still lives. Darius flees east, but he is no longer the ruler of an intact empire. He carries what remains of his kingship. According to tradition, about 7,000 talents, 3,000 horsemen, and 6,000 infantry. He is still king of Persia, but by now he is also a fugitive. From Persepolis, Alexander moves back toward Ecbatana, then toward the Caspian Gates and the eastern regions, as far as Bactria and Sogdiana. The war changes form. No longer great battles, but pursuit, forced marches, and ever more remote territories. But Darius is not fleeing alone. Beside him are nobles and satraps who no longer believe he can save the empire. Among them is Bessus, satrap of Bactria, one of the strongest men in the Persian East. He understands that Darius no longer has the strength to hold the empire together. At that point, the great king is betrayed. Darius is arrested by his own men. When Alexander approaches, the conspirators decide he cannot be left alive. They wound him mortally and flee eastward. Alexander arrives too late. He fails to capture Darius alive, but Darius' death gives him a political opportunity. Alexander no longer presents himself as the only man who defeated the Persian king. He now appears as the one who avenges him. Alexander orders royal honors for Darius. The body is treated with respect. The message is clear. Alexander no longer wants to be merely the king of the Macedonians against Persia. He wants to appear as the legitimate successor to Persian power. But the war goes on. Bessus proclaims himself king under the name Artaxerxes. He wears the symbols of Persian kingship and claims Darius' inheritance. But his power is fragile. He is not recognized as great king by the entire empire. For many, he remains above all one thing: the traitor who delivered Darius to death. Even before the struggle with Bessus is over, a crisis erupts inside the Macedonian army. The first signal is the Philotas affair. Parmenian's son is accused of failing to report a conspiracy against the king. He belongs to one of the army's most powerful families, but he is tried before the Macedonian assembly, condemned, and killed. But the blow does not stop with him. Soon after, Philotas' father, Parmenion, is killed as well. He is far away in Ecbatana, where he controls troops, money, and a strategic position. Perhaps Alexander fears rebellion after Philotas' death. Perhaps he believes he cannot leave Parmenion alive. In any case, the decision is brutal. The man who served Philip and led the Macedonian wing in decisive battles is put to death. External conquest now becomes an internal settling of accounts. Only afterward does Alexander pursue Bessus. He too was betrayed by his men, captured, and handed to the Macedonians. The punishment is brutal. He is mutilated, then executed as a usurper and murderer of the great king. But the East does not surrender with him. In Sogdiana, local leaders like Spitamenes turn the war into ambushes, revolts, and pursuits. The Macedonian army has to split up, chase rebels, garrison cities, found new bases, and control distant regions ever farther from Macedonia. Then comes an even deeper wound. Cletus the Black. He is the man who saved Alexander's life at the Granicus. Without him, the expedition could have ended there. Years later, during a banquet, Cletus openly criticizes the king in front of everyone. He accuses Alexander of forgetting the Macedonians, exalting the Persians too much, and overshadowing Philip and the old companions. Wine, pride, and rage do the rest. Alexander loses control and kills him with his own hands. It is a dramatic moment. The man who saved his life dies at his hands. From here, the fracture is no longer merely political. It is now personal. Alexander seeks to rule as king of Asia. He adopts Persian ritual and tries to impose proskinesis, bowing before the sovereign. For many Macedonians, it is too much. They see themselves not as Eastern subjects, but as comrades in arms of a Macedonian king. In 327 BC, the Eastern War reaches one of its most spectacular moments, the Sogdian Rock. The defenders consider it impregnable and taunt Alexander, saying that to capture it, he needs men with wings. Alexander answers with action. He chooses 300 mountain-trained men. At night, they climb the cliff with ropes and pegs. 30 fall and die. But at dawn, the survivors appear above the rock. The fortress surrenders, shaken more by the courage of the feet than by force of arms. Among the prisoners is Roxanne, daughter of the noble Oxyartus. Alexander marries her. Tradition emphasizes her beauty, but the political meaning is even more important. With that marriage, Alexander tries to bind himself to local Eastern elites and build a form of power that is not only Macedonian, but imperial. He has won the war against Persia, but the price is becoming ever clearer. To become king of Asia, Alexander starts to lose the old Macedonian guard. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell. In the next video, Alexander will push further east toward India, where he meets his limit.